The hall was not large, but it felt heavy with expectation as people filled every seat and stood along the walls holding programs in their hands and whispering to each other, while the judges sat at a long table facing the stage with tired expressions that came from a full day of performances that had blurred together into a single memory of missed notes and half-learned pieces and hopeful faces that could not quite deliver what they promised, and the judges had tried to stay kind and patient, but their shoulders were stiff and their eyes carried the look of people who were ready for the day to end. The stage lights were warm and bright, and reflected softly off the polished surface of the piano, which sat alone at the center waiting quietly, as if it had already heard every sound that would be made on it that night and knew that most of them would fade as soon as they were played. And the piano bench was slightly scuffed from years of use, and the floor beneath it creaked faintly when the stagehand made a last adjustment, and then disappeared into the shadows. Earlier performances had followed a familiar pattern, with children and adults walking out trying to look confident while their hands shook and their smiles tightened. And some had played well enough to earn polite nods, while others stumbled and stopped and started again. And each time the judges leaned forward with hope that the next performer might be different, and each time that hope slowly slipped away, until the judges exchanged looks that said they had heard enough for one day. One judge rubbed his temples and glanced at the clock on the wall behind the audience, and another judge folded her hands and took a deep breath as if preparing herself to offer gentle criticism once again, while the third judge stared at the piano with an expression that was neither angry nor bored, but simply empty, as if the music had drained something from him that would take time to return. When the host announced the next performer, there was a slight pause as the name was read and the age followed, and a few people in the audience leaned forward trying to see who would walk out because the age sounded almost unbelievable. And there was a small ripple of quiet surprise that moved through the room, but it quickly settled, because surprise alone had already failed them many times that day. From the side of the stage, a small child appeared walking carefully with short, steady steps, and wearing clothes that were simple and neat and perhaps chosen by someone who wanted the child to look respectful rather than impressive. And the child did not wave or smile widely but simply looked at the piano, and then at the bench as if measuring the distance and planning each movement in advance. The audience watched with mixed reactions as some people smiled with curiosity while others exchanged doubtful glances, and a few crossed their arms unconsciously preparing themselves for disappointment. And the judges straightened slightly out of habit, but their faces did not change much, because they had learned not to expect too much from appearances. The child climbed onto the bench with a small effort, adjusting the position carefully and placing both feet in a way that looked practiced and calm. And for a moment there was silence in the room that felt different from the earlier silences, because this one was not filled with coughing or shuffling, but with a kind of still attention, as if everyone sensed that something was about to begin even if they did not know what it would be. The child rested both hands above the keys without touching them yet and took a slow breath. And in that simple motion there was no fear or hurry, but a focus that seemed unusual for someone so young. And the judges noticed this without fully understanding why it caught their attention, because they had seen many performers pause before playing, but this pause felt grounded and intentional rather than nervous. One judge leaned forward, slightly noticing the relaxed shoulders and the natural curve of the fingers, and another judge tilted her head, recognizing a posture she had only seen in students who had spent many hours learning not just how to play notes, but how to listen to silence. And the third judge felt a faint stir of interest that surprised him, because he had almost given up on feeling anything new that day. The audience held their breath as the child finally lowered both hands to the keys, and the first sound filled the room, clean and clear and perfectly placed. And it was not loud or showy, but it carried confidence and direction. And in that first moment something shifted in the room as people stopped thinking about the child's age and started listening only to the music. The sound seemed to settle into the space as if it belonged there, and the piano responded warmly under the small hands, producing a tone that was balanced and controlled. And the melody moved forward without hesitation, each note connected to the next with care and intention. And the judges exchanged quick glances, because they could hear immediately that this was not a beginner, and not a child guessing their way through a memorized pattern. As the piece continued, the child's face remained calm but expressive, with eyes focused slightly downward and brows gently drawn in concentration. And there was an emotional awareness in the way the music rose and softened that suggested understanding rather than imitation. And the audience began to lean forward as a group, drawn in by something they had not expected to feel. The judges, who had been ready to give up, now found themselves sitting straighter with pens forgotten on the table. And one of them felt a quiet disbelief grow inside, because the interpretation was thoughtful and mature without being forced. And it revealed a sensitivity that could not be taught easily and certainly could not be faked. The room felt warmer somehow as the music continued, and people forgot to move or whisper. And even those who had come only out of casual interest now felt that they were witnessing something rare and honest. And the child's small hands moved with precision across the keys, never rushing, never dragging, but allowing the piece to unfold naturally, as if telling a story that had lived inside the child for a long time. By the time the opening section of the piece reached its close, the judges were no longer thinking about how long the day had been or how many performances they had endured, because their attention was fully captured, and they realized that they had not merely been waiting for the day to end, but waiting for this moment without knowing it. The music did not feel like a display meant to impress, but like a conversation between the child and the piano, and that sincerity reached the audience in a way that technical perfection alone never could, and people felt their doubts quietly dissolve as they listened. And the judges who had almost given up now felt something close to hope return quietly and unexpectedly. This was only the beginning of the performance, but already it had changed the atmosphere of the room, and the judges knew that whatever happened next, they would remember this moment when the first notes proved them wrong and reminded them why they had chosen to sit at that table and listen in the first place. The music continued to flow with a steady confidence, and the child moved through the next section of the piece with ease as the melody became more complex and the harmony deepened, and the sound filled the hall in a way that felt deliberate and thoughtful rather than accidental, and the audience could sense that the child was not rushing to finish, but allowing each phrase to breathe and settle before moving forward. The judges listened closely now with their full attention fixed on the stage, and one of them felt a quiet shift inside because the phrasing showed control that usually came only after years of study and mistakes and long hours alone with an instrument. And yet here it was coming from someone who could barely reach the pedals, and another judge noticed the balance between strength and softness in the playing, and recognized an emotional awareness that could not be explained by talent alone. As the tempo changed slightly, the child adjusted naturally without tension, and the hands moved with confidence across the keys, while the body remained relaxed and grounded. And this calm presence began to affect the room as people who had arrived tired and distracted now felt focused and alert, and connected to the unfolding performance in a way that surprised them. In the audience, a few parents glanced at each other with expressions that mixed admiration and disbelief, and some felt a quiet emotion rise, because the music reminded them of moments in their own lives when something unexpected had moved them deeply without warning, and they realized they were holding their breath again, not from doubt but from respect. The judges were no longer thinking about critique or scoring or time limits, and instead they found themselves listening as ordinary people moved by the honesty of the performance, and one judge felt a memory surface from his own childhood when music had first felt alive to him, and he wondered when he had stopped listening with that same openness. The child reached a softer passage and allowed the notes to fall gently into the silence between them, and the room responded by becoming even quieter, as if everyone understood instinctively that this moment required care and patience, and the piano sounded warm and intimate, and every sound felt intentional and meaningful. By the time this section came to a close, the mood in the hall had fully transformed, and the earlier fatigue and skepticism had disappeared, replaced by a shared sense of anticipation and respect. And the judges now knew that this performance was no longer just another audition, but something that would stay with them long after the day ended. The piece moved into a more demanding section, and the music began to rise with stronger emotion as the child increased the intensity without losing control, and the hands traveled further across the keyboard with confidence that felt earned rather than forced, and the sound grew fuller, filling the hall with a presence that made people sit even straighter in their seats. The judges could hear the technical difficulty clearly now, and they understood that this section would challenge even experienced players, because it required precision, strength, and sensitivity all at once. And yet the child handled it with remarkable ease, allowing the music to build naturally without showing strain or hesitation. And this was the moment when doubt fully disappeared from the judges' minds. One judge glanced at the others and saw the same quiet disbelief reflected back, because they were witnessing something that defied their expectations, not only because of the child's age, but because of the depth of understanding in the performance. And it was clear that this was not a case of memorization alone, but of true musical connection. The audience felt the shift, as well as the energy in the room grew more focused and emotionally charged. And some people felt a tightening in their chest, as the music seemed to speak directly to them, expressing feelings they had not expected to feel in a place like this, and in a moment like this. The child remained composed even as the music demanded more intensity, and the posture stayed steady and relaxed, and the expression on the face reflected concentration mixed with quiet emotion. And this balance between control and feeling made the performance feel honest and real rather than dramatic or exaggerated. As the section reached its peak, the sound of the piano became powerful, yet never harsh, and the child guided the music forward with confidence, as if fully aware of where the piece was going and why. And the judges realized that they were no longer evaluating a contestant, but listening to an artist who had something genuine to say through the music. When this demanding passage finally eased, the release felt natural and earned, and the room seemed to exhale together. And in that shared breath, there was a collective understanding that something special was unfolding, and that this performance was moving beyond skill into something deeper that could not be easily explained, but could be clearly felt. As the intensity settled, the child guided the music into a quieter and more reflective section, and the change in mood felt gentle and sincere, as if the piece itself was taking a moment to breathe and look inward, and the hands softened their touch, allowing the piano to speak in a more delicate voice that drew the audience closer emotionally rather than pulling them back. The judges noticed how carefully the child shaped this transition, because it is often where performers reveal uncertainty or rush to regain momentum. But here there was patience and trust, and the child allowed the silence between phrases to exist naturally, giving the music space to resonate in the room and in the hearts of those listening. The audience responded instinctively as people leaned forward slightly, and some rested their hands together while others felt a quiet emotion surface that they could not easily name. And it was no longer about being impressed, but about feeling connected to something honest and fragile that was being shared without fear. One judge felt a tightness in his throat as he listened, because the simplicity of this section reminded him of why music mattered to him before it became a profession filled with rules and evaluations. And he realized that this child was playing with the kind of sincerity that many adults lose over time. The child's expression reflected this shift as well, with eyes focused and calm, and a softness in the face that matched the sound, and there was no sign of nerves or self-awareness, only presence and attention to the music itself. And this purity made the moment feel even more powerful. The piano responded beautifully as each note settled into the hall and lingered just long enough to be felt before fading, and the room remained perfectly still, as if everyone understood that any movement might break the fragile connection that had formed between the child and the audience. As this reflective passage continued, the judges felt a shared respect deepen, because it became clear that the child was not simply following instructions or repeating lessons, but making choices that showed understanding and emotional intelligence. And this realization carried a quiet weight that stayed with them as they listened. By the end of this section, the atmosphere felt intimate and sincere, and the audience no longer thought of the child as young or small, but simply as a musician telling a story through sound. And the judges, who had once been ready to give up, now found themselves fully present, grateful that they had stayed long enough to witness this unfolding moment. The music began to gather strength again, and the child led the transition smoothly, as if guiding the listener from reflection back into motion, and the change felt natural and confident without any sudden force, and the tempo lifted slightly, bringing a sense of forward movement that reawakened the energy in the room. The judges recognized how carefully this section was handled, because it required balance and timing, and the child managed it with an ease that suggested deep familiarity with the structure of the piece, and an instinctive understanding of how emotion should rise and fall. And this awareness impressed them more than speed or volume ever could. The audience felt the renewed momentum, and some people shifted in their seats not from restlessness, but from engagement, as the music began to carry a hopeful tone, and the sound of the piano grew brighter and more open, filling the hall with warmth that felt reassuring. And the child's hands moved with confidence across the keys, and there was a lightness in the playing that contrasted beautifully with the earlier intensity and softness. And this contrast made the performance feel complete and thoughtful, as if each section was part of a larger story rather than a series of separate challenges. One judge smiled without realizing it, because the joy in this section felt genuine and unforced, and it reminded her that music at its best could lift the spirit without needing to prove anything. And she noticed that the child seemed completely absorbed in the sound rather than the audience or the judges. As the melody developed, the child maintained a steady rhythm and clear articulation, and every phrase landed with purpose. And the audience responded with quiet appreciation, feeling a growing sense of admiration that was no longer mixed with surprise, but grounded in respect. The hall felt brighter somehow, as if the music itself was changing the atmosphere, and people who had entered the room tired and uncertain now felt awake and connected. And the judges felt a shared understanding that this performance was unfolding exactly as it needed to, without rush or excess. As this section drew toward its close, the music carried a sense of confidence and promise, and the child guided it forward with calm assurance, and the room remained fully attentive, aware that the performance was moving closer to something meaningful that had been carefully built from the very first note. The piece entered a section that required both control and endurance, and the child approached it with steady focus, allowing the rhythm to remain firm while shaping the melody with care, and the sound grew richer without becoming overwhelming, and this balance held the attention of everyone in the room without effort. The judges could hear how demanding this passage was, because it tested consistency and precision over time. And many performers lost clarity here, yet the child maintained a clear sense of direction, and each phrase flowed naturally into the next, showing patience and discipline that felt far beyond what they expected from someone so young. The audience sensed the quiet determination in the playing, and there was a feeling of trust that developed as listeners knew they were being guided safely through the most challenging part of the piece. And this trust allowed them to relax into the experience rather than anticipate mistakes. The child's posture remained calm and grounded, and there was no sign of tension in the shoulders or hands. and this physical ease translated directly into the sound, making it smooth and confident. And the judges noticed this with admiration because they knew how difficult it was to achieve even after years of training. One judge felt a growing sense of respect that went beyond the performance itself, because it was clear that this child had learned not only how to play, but how to listen and respond and adjust in real time. And this awareness separated skill from artistry in a way that could not be ignored. As the music continued, the room felt unified, as if everyone was moving together with the rhythm, and the child remained fully present, guiding the piece forward with quiet authority. And this presence made the performance feel secure and sincere rather than fragile. When this demanding section began to ease, the transition was smooth and controlled, and the sense of accomplishment in the sound was subtle but unmistakable. And the judges felt certain now that they were witnessing something rare, not because of age or surprise, but because of genuine musical maturity that could not be taught quickly or easily. As the music softened again, the child allowed the intensity to fade gradually and guided the piece into a calmer space that felt reflective rather than tired, and this change showed awareness of the emotional arc because nothing felt accidental or left to chance, and the sound settled gently into the hall with warmth and clarity. The judges felt a quiet sense of relief mixed with admiration, because transitions like this often reveal fatigue or loss of focus. Yet the child remained fully engaged and attentive, and the phrasing stayed clear and thoughtful, and this consistency confirmed that the performance was built on understanding rather than momentary brilliance. The audience remained deeply attentive, and many people felt a growing emotional connection as the music seemed to speak in a more personal voice. And some listeners felt memories surface quietly as the gentle tones carried a sense of honesty and calm that reached beyond the stage. The child's expression reflected this shift as well, with a relaxed focus and a softness that matched the sound, and there was no sign of strain or distraction, only presence and commitment to the music. And this sincerity continued to draw the audience closer with each passing moment. One judge noticed that the child was shaping the final phrases of this section with intention, allowing the sound to linger just enough to be felt before moving on, and this sensitivity impressed her deeply, because it showed trust in the music and confidence in silence as much as sound. The piano responded beautifully, and the notes blended smoothly, creating a sense of closure without finality, and the room felt calm and connected, as if everyone was sharing the same emotional space, guided by the steady hands of someone far younger than anyone would have believed capable of such control. As this section came to a gentle close, there was a quiet understanding among the judges and the audience that the performance was nearing its end, and that something meaningful had already been shared, and the child remained poised and focused, ready to carry the music forward with the same honesty that had defined every moment so far. The music began its final build with a sense of quiet confidence, and the child guided the sound forward with clarity and intention, allowing the earlier themes to return in a way that felt complete and purposeful. And the audience could sense that the journey was reaching its destination without needing any signal beyond the feeling in the music itself. The judges listened closely as the structure of the piece became clear, and they could hear how carefully the child connected each idea to the next, showing an understanding of the whole, rather than just the moment. And this awareness brought a deep satisfaction, because it confirmed that the performance had been shaped thoughtfully from beginning to end. The audience felt a renewed focus as the energy lifted again, and the sound grew fuller and more confident, and people leaned in not out of tension, but out of respect, because they trusted the child completely now and wanted to follow every movement and every shift in emotion until the very end. The child remained steady and composed, and the hands moved with assurance across the keys, carrying the music forward without hesitation. And there was a sense of joy beneath the control, as if the child was not only performing, but fully experiencing the meaning of what was being shared. One judge felt a quiet smile form as he realized that he was no longer surprised but grateful, and the earlier exhaustion of the day had faded, completely replaced by a renewed belief in why moments like this mattered, and why listening carefully was always worth the effort. The piano filled the hall with a sound that felt confident and resolved, and the balance between strength and sensitivity remained intact, showing maturity that could not be explained by training alone. And the judges exchanged brief glances that carried shared understanding and respect. As this final section unfolded, the atmosphere in the room felt unified and calm, and everyone seemed to move together with the music carried by the steady presence of the child, and guided toward an ending that felt honest, earned, and deeply satisfying. The music began to slow, and the child allowed the final phrases to unfold with care and restraint, shaping each moment so that nothing felt rushed or overstated, and the sound carried a sense of completion that settled gently over the room and made everyone aware that the end was near. The judges felt a growing stillness inside themselves as they listened, because this was the point where meaning often became clear, and they could hear how thoughtfully the child was closing the musical story, returning to a place of calm and balance that reflected everything that had come before. The audience remained completely silent and attentive, and many people felt an emotion rise that they did not try to explain, because the honesty of the performance spoke directly without needing words, and the connection between the child and the listeners felt strong and shared. The child's hands moved more slowly now, and the touch on the keys was soft and controlled, allowing the sound to fade naturally. And the expression on the face remained focused and peaceful, as if fully aware of the weight and beauty of this final stretch. One judge felt a deep sense of respect settle in because endings reveal truth, and this ending was sincere and confident without seeking approval or reaction. And it confirmed that the performance had been guided by understanding rather than ego. The piano echoed gently as the final notes approached, and the room seemed to lean into the sound, holding onto it for as long as possible. And the judges no longer thought about evaluation, but about how rare it was to witness such clarity and maturity expressed so simply. As the last phrases continued, the atmosphere felt quiet and full at the same time, and everyone understood that this moment would stay with them, and that what they had witnessed was not just a performance, but a genuine expression of something deeply felt and carefully shared. The final note settled softly into the space, and the child lifted both hands from the keys with calm control, allowing the sound to fade completely before moving, and the silence that followed felt full and meaningful, as if the room itself needed a moment to understand what had just happened. For a brief time, no one moved and no one spoke, and the judges remained still, looking at the child, with expressions that showed respect, surprise, and quiet gratitude. And the audience held the silence naturally, not because they were told to, but because the moment deserved care. The child stood up slowly and stepped back from the piano with the same calm presence shown throughout the performance. And there was no gesture of celebration or expectation, only a simple awareness that the music had been shared honestly and completely. Then the applause began gently at first and quickly grew into something strong and sincere as people stood without thinking and clapped with admiration that carried warmth rather than excitement. And the judges rose as well, no longer as evaluators, but as listeners who had been deeply moved. One judge felt emotion rise as he realized how close he had come to giving up earlier and how grateful he was that he had stayed and listened. And another judge smiled openly, knowing that moments like this were rare and meaningful, and reminded her why she believed in potential and patience. The child looked out at the audience with quiet humility and accepted the response without surprise or pride. And in that moment, it was clear that this was not about winning or recognition, but about connection and truth expressed through music. As the applause continued, the judges understood that they had witnessed something unforgettable, and that the day they thought had nothing left to offer had given them one of its most powerful moments. And the title of the performance no longer felt dramatic, but simply accurate, because they had truly given up until an 8-year-old child prodigy performed the piece flawlessly in seconds.